Okay, you don't super glue the roots. Super glue around the roots. Boy, did it make a mess. But that's okay, because I have a plan. It's a little harder to get microclimates that stay consistent because it's such a tiny amount of space. Hi guys, how's it going? My name's Josh. I'm the owner and founder of the Bio Dude, and today I have another terrarium tips video for y'all. Y'all have really seemed to enjoy this series. Alright guys, so for our Black Friday sale, we have a whole bunch of the small BioArc mini terrariums that we're giving out as gifts. There are different tiers to be able to get them, so when you come in, learn about the details, check us out on social media to be able to get info about that, and we're really excited. So what I'm gonna be doing today is building 3 different tiny terrariums, all different types of ecosystems for the most part. I have a very small one, a medium one, and a large one. I'm gonna go over some tips and tricks on how to set these small terrariums up so that way you're successful, as well as how to deal with the harder to control microclimates. We're not building these really for animals in mind. Some of these you might be able to keep something small in, like the large FD200. However, this is primarily just to show you guys tips and tricks for very, very tiny terrariums. So whether you're keeping an invertebrate or have an isopod habitat, this video is gonna help you out with what you need. So now in front of me, as you can see, I have a good amount of stuff in here. I have a lot of building materials. I got some plants, I got some mosses. I got a whole bunch of fun stuff. I have this little tiny BioArc terrarium right here. You can see how big it is. This is very tiny. You can also see how the ventilation works. It is just 3 drilled holes here onto the side. How we're gonna be building this is just a very simple tropical habitat that is primarily the focal point is going to be the moss and the rock in the very middle with maybe a plant or 2 in there, which we'll get to. So the very first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to put in my drainage layer. And this is my HydroGrow version 1. So now I like using this drainage layer here. You don't want it to be very deep. This is primarily to put a little bit of calcium into the water, and then to also make sure that you are able to have your substrate be very healthy, and that way it drains the way that you want to have it drain. The next thing that we're going to use is Fluval's substratum. You guys have seen me use this in the past for many builds. This is fish tank substrate. It's nothing crazy. It's just pumice rock ground up into balls. It is a great product, and it's also nice to create different levels of elevation within your terrarium. But what's really important is if you're going to use this as a sole drainage layer, you need to make sure that you use a lot of it because it does compact over time. So that is something that you really want to be cognizant of. So you can see here we have a nice little layer defined here. We have what is the substratum layer, and then we have the HydroGrow version 1 layer. I did not use any divider to separate it. The next step that I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna give this a small mist, right like this. What this is gonna do is kind of keep everything in place during my scaping process, so that way as little bit of mixing between HydroGrow version 1 and the substratum happens, and that is important. I'll get into that shortly. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to look at my centerpiece, which is this right here. Perfect. Okay. So once I have my centerpiece, I know that this is going to likely be a 360-degree terrarium. So I want to make sure that the centerpiece that I'm using fits, the niche that I'm wanting to build for. Whether it's just for you or whether it's just for, a little critter like a small isopod that you want to put in here. So now that I have my centerpiece in here, what I'm going to start doing is getting the rest of my mixture ready to go. I have some Terraflora. Now, for the Terraflora, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit in this bucket here. I'm gonna take a little bit of spag dust, and I'm gonna mix it, and I'm gonna mist it. Now, we already have the BioShot added into the substrate. It is highly recommended to put in a soil inoculant because we're going to be getting a good amount of minerals from the substratum and the hydrogrow. But what we're missing is essentially nutrients for the plants themselves. So you guys can see that I pre-mixed it. Now, the reason I'm doing all of this, guys, is because I am trying to minimize my hands going in here as much as possible. The less hands in interaction in these tiny habitats when building them, the less of a chance of something getting messed up. You don't want it to be bone dry and dusty because reintegrating your soil, like to get it rehydrated after you've already input all of your pieces, can be pretty challenging. So I do have some of my Terrascaping materials, which we do sell this equipment on BioDube. Some people like to use them. I don't really use them when building for reptiles. However, when it comes to doing my mossariums and some of my other stuff, or working in really tight spaces that you can see here, this has been extremely helpful. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna get the sides cleaned off, so that way I know that I got most of the substrate that's on the side. So here you go. This is the front. You can clearly see the 3 layers. You see Hydrogrow version 1, the substratum, and then my Terraflora. This should keep your substrate healthy long term without over misting. It's really important that as water starts flowing through here, the water level in tiny terrariums, you never, ever, ever want it to go past the first layer of your drainage layer, ever. If you notice that it's starting to build down there, you need to cut your misting. Don't mist for a couple weeks until that bottom layer has evaporated, because there is no draining this drainage layer. Once you overflow it, it becomes anaerobic. That's it. You have to throw it away and start over. Now, the next thing I have here is some absolutely stunning fern moss, which you can see right here. Now, this is the hand-propagated fern moss that we sell on biodude.com, and you guys have been seeing that I've been using this a lot. And what I'm gonna do is just kind of cut around right like this. And the reason I'm cutting this is so that way I'm not ripping the moss to shreds when I'm putting it in. Look at that. And then I should be able to go right like that with the other piece. Boom. Look at that. Easy, simple, took 30 seconds. I love that. I love the lush green top layer. Now, as you give this water, it's not going to look so flat and desiccated. It's going to come back up, look nice and fluffy and ferny. So now what I have here is some reverse osmosis water. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through like this, and I'm going to give the moss a nice watering. Now, why did I choose to use a rock? I can tell you exactly why. Because as water hits this rock, it's going to shed lots of minerals off the rock, which this moss is going to love. And then as the moss needs nutrients, it needs to grow, it's going to slowly start spreading up on this rock, and it is going to look really, really nice. So you guys can just kind of see here, I did not use a lot of water, and look at this already. Look at that. So the moss is going to absorb all of this water, okay? Like, it isn't deep enough to go through. So right now it's permeating through the moss and going back down. When we're done doing the build, I can show you where the water level is, and then we can kind of go from there to see if we're happy with that. And then here, I got a couple really nice accents. We have a whole bunch of different twigs and manzanita and other things like that. So then what I'm gonna do is I got a nice little manzanita branch here and a nice little manzanita branch here, right like this. So we really try to facilitate this for you guys. We do offer our forest floor decor pack version 2. This is all little tiny wood pieces. So if you're trying to do something like this, we have all the accents and things that you need. And then for what I would call the coup de grace, thinking I'm gonna put a baby tears right here. Now, when you aren't using animals in here, making sure that your plants are disinfected doesn't matter as much. What you worry about is bringing in things like thrips or spider mites or, you know, ants, things like that. We still highly recommend that you thoroughly disinfect your plants before putting them in. I have this beautiful baby tears right here. So I have this bucket of clean water in here. What I'm gonna do, there we go. I want this to be de-dirted as much as possible and to have that root structure be as manageable as possible because we are dealing with a very, very tight space. And I'm gonna show you how we're gonna deal with this. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bunch it up like this. So this is how I'm gonna plant it. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. So I'm gonna lay this right here. Next, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and push this moss right here like this, using this tool. And then I'm gonna use my tool to dig all the way down to Hydro Grow version 1. So not down past version 1, but into the substratum. Then we're gonna take this and we're just gonna slowly press it down like this. Again, being very careful with the plant, making sure that we don't mess it up, and boom, there's a little beautiful baby tears right here like that. Okay? Now, you can also choose to put in other things, very, very tiny plants. The reason that I am choosing to specifically use the baby tears is because I fully expect it to grow up on this rock. So, honestly, I like this. Let's take a look here. So, you can see here, it looks like I over-misted by about 3 seconds. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go right over to where my trash can is. I'm just out through those little holes. Boom. I drained that tiny, tiny, tiny bit of excess water. Not a lot, but just a little bit. Wow, that looks really nice. Okay. Then we put the lid on. Tiny terrarium number 1 completed. Okay guys, now for the next terrarium that I have, this is a 1.5 gallon cylindrical terrarium. Now the difference between this one and this one, you can see it has built-in ventilation at the top. This is key. When you are deciding to keep animals in something like this, you need to have a full grasp and understanding of how well the ventilation is going to work. So what this allows you to do is adjust at the very top. If yours just has a screen and you still notice that it's not enough airflow, you can always install a small computer fan. And then you can also see this has a small LED light built into the very middle that has a normal USB outlet that you can plug right into a timer. Now, these larger habitats are a lot easier. The bigger the habitat, the easier it's going to be to maintain it over time. Now, not all mini terrariums need to be tropical. You can do mini terrariums to be a lot of different things. So I'm going to do more of an arid one, and you guys can let me know how that is. Now, when it comes to the arid habitat, you need to make sure that you have more calcium, more minerals into your soil to enrich it, right? Because you are in a very clay, granite type based ecosystem. So we will not be using a drainage layer. Instead, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be taking the substratum that we can see right here. So I'm going to take some substratum and I'm going to do my initial layer here at the very bottom. Now this is going to work as somewhat as a mini drainage layer, but in actuality, guys, that's not what we're using it for. What we're going to be doing then is taking our substrate and we are going to be making sure that we thoroughly mix it together. Okay, so I'm going to take some of my substrate. I'm going to need a little bit more than what I used last time. Okay, and now for this, you can use my Terra Sahara, or if you really want to be adventurous, you can use my Terra Arania, because that has a little bit more hardwoods and biomass in it. So what I did was I took Hydro Grow version 1 with my Terra Arania, and I have it in my bin here. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to take just a tiny bit of sand, just a tiny bit. Next, I'm going to mix it together. And then I need to get this not really wet, but damp. Then I'm going to take this again, and I'm going to mix it. So I want you guys to be able to see the consistency of the soil. It's not dusty. It's not really wet either. If you make your soil sopping wet in a little tiny habitat like this for desert plants or arid plants, it's going to take a very, very long time for that substrate to dry. You have a high chance of your plants just rotting out before you even get anywhere. So next, what we're going to do is we need to add some biomass. So here we have what is a nice little leaf litter pulp mix. So what this is water oak that are just tiny crushed pieces. We sell this on biodude.com as a leaf litter pulp mix, and this is one of my favorite substrate add-ons that we use within the scope of Biodude when it comes to tiny terrariums. Okay, so now we're nice and mixed. I'm going to then take the scoop, and I'm going to start scooping. Now, as I do this, you want to watch your dust level. Okay, so this is a little dustier than actually what I thought, but take a look at the substrate. Really, really nice, clunky. It's going to drain. There's a good amount of biodegradables in here. I can tell you that I'm fully planning on having this be multi-leveled. So I got a beautiful piece of dragonwood, and then what I also have here is this beautiful piece of mopani. Go here like this. Okay, so now what I have created is a lower front section and then a higher back section. So now what I'm going to do is for the back section, I'm going to face my dumper this way, and I'm going to go right like this. And I'm going to try to have it be as even as possible. Look at that. Now what's really important is you don't want to compact it down, but it needs to be compacted down just a little bit. I'm then going to take my mister. Nothing crazy. Okay. Now you should be able to see your moisture gradient very, very clearly. Okay. You notice how the water's kind of puddling up here? That's okay. That's what it's going to do. So I found this beautiful piece of Amazon driftwood, and this is going to be the centralized piece in the very middle. So I know this is going to be here. But what I also need to make sure of is that the plant that I pick is going to be able to adequately fit. So here's the plant that I have. This is a Sansevieria. This is just a different variant of it, and I got all the dirt off really easy. Like, this was super easy. You can see root systems do not go crazy, crazy deep. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this, and then just like before, I'm going to make sure I have a nice handle on this, and then I'm just going to move this back and forth like this to create the hole. Now you want your hole to be maybe for a desert about 1/4 of an inch above the substratum, so that way the plants can go down and have access to the roots. Let me see. Now that I see that it's going to fit, I'm then going to come over here, and I am just going to slowly but methodically move all of the substrate to be nice and even with this plant, and making sure that that is looking good. I like that a lot. Now, here at the very top, I'm noticing I have a little bit of a substrate disparity here on the bottom left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this small little monkey pod right down, yeah. I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dump it right there. Perfect. That was literally just the amount that we needed. Okay, now here at the very front, this is where you can get really creative with different rocks and granite and other things like that, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. So what you see right here, this is all slate stone dust. You all know that we sell the flagstone, and this is basically what is left at the bottom of the box. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna turn it to where the end is here. I'm just gonna go right like this at the very, very front. Okay, now you can see that was very dusty, and boy, did it make a mess. But that's okay, because I have a plan. Next, I have some awesome little desert rocks that I'm just gonna kind of put right here in the very front, like this. And then if I didn't like how they got positioned, which I didn't, it's really easy just to kind of go right like this. And then last but not least, a couple little biodegradable pieces. That right there, that right there, that right there. That just adds a little bit of character. Okay, check this out. And then we're gonna go right like this, very lightly. I'm only giving about a 30% bolus onto this mister, primarily just to get everything cleaned off. Because again, I'm not trying to overwater. And then I'm gonna go down here and I'm gonna give my Sansevieria really, really nice watering. So now we have the front, which is covered in a nice granite layer. So you can see, very carefully, we have our we have this substratum. Then we have a little bit Terrarium. You could also use Terra Sahara. And then we have some slate stone grounded up into a powder on top with small rocks and other various types of nut pods there. I like that. But now what we also have here is this whole back portion that is literally just dirt on top. So now what we're gonna do to add a little bit more of a level of authenticity, we have some sand. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna take my sand and I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dump it right like this. And if it's okay, if it gets on your wood, it's okay if it gets on your rocks. It is quite okay because we're gonna be able just to move that stuff around. So then what we're gonna do, nice. Need a little bit more back here. Perfect. I dig it. Now, for yet again, the hard part is we're just gonna take this and we're just gonna get all this sand off of the plant and off the background. And again, it's okay if a little bit of water gets on the sand, it's just gonna become super absorptive. Now, because of this, sand can impact your substrate's ability to breathe. That is why we don't recommend using sand with reptiles as a base. Don't ever do it. It's asking for trouble. What's gonna happen here is aeration from here to here, it's still gonna be functioning, but it's definitely going to be impacted. Well, you see how this is like almost an inch, where this is barely 1/8 of an inch. When you have it really, really deep like this, that is when you run into those problems. So now what you can do is just kind of go right like this, and you can literally just put a couple holes on top of the sand like this. So that way when the sand dries, it's still able to aerate top to bottom. That's a little bit of a trick. And then next, I have some nice little rocks. This is where the tweezers come in. So I'm gonna put the rock. All right, I'm digging it. I think it looks pretty cool. Now let me take paper towel. I'm gonna go right like this. So I have some arid springtails, and I am gonna add some arid springtails in here. Take a look. And I'm just gonna go right like this. Boom. Springtails are put in. You notice I didn't put springtails in the other one, and that is because it is simply, they will just show up in there, and it is such a tiny habitat. Next, I have some super glue. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go right here, and I'm gonna pop a. So one of the biggest needs, we have a big open spot here. We have an open spot here, and an open spot here. So we have this beautiful tillandsia right here that I think would just do extremely well right here, like this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my Terrarium super glue, and then I'm gonna get it where it needs. I'm just gonna go ahead and put a nice little glob right there. You can see the glob right there, and that's what's gonna hold the tillandsia in place. I got another neat looking tillandsia right there, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna put a big old glob on this tillandsia like this, and then I'm gonna set it, boom, right there. And last but not least, I got another tillandsia that I'm gonna put right on top of there. I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna do it. So I'm gonna use the super glue, big old glob. And now this is where you gotta be really careful. Boom. Now, the super glue is adhering, and this is gonna need about 2 minutes to dry, so I am not touching it until it does. I'm just gonna put a leaf here, put a leaf here, leaf there, pick up a leaf there. Okay. Now, as far as maintaining this terrarium, there's going to be a couple things that I'm going to be doing. I probably will miss this habitat once a week, if that. We're going to make sure that we always see humidity build up here at the very bottom of where your substratum is, but under no circumstances should there be a pool of water. If you see a pool of water in here, you need to take this lid off, and you need to let it dry out and sit for a while. We're going to be having the ventilation on at all times. And then with this LED light built in, we are going to have it so that way it's on for about 10 hours a day. And I dig it. I think it looks pretty good. Let's let it sit, and then we'll get it plugged in, and we'll check in at the end of the video with how it's doing. So last but not least, we have what I've been looking forward to, which is our big boy tropical setup. Let me get my super glue over here. One of the best things about tiny terrariums is this is really easy to do with your kids. For example, my daughter's 4.5, and she says, "Daddy, I really want a bearded dragon." Well, we all know who's going to be taking care of that bearded dragon, right? To gauge their interest, and if this is the route you want to go, in the form of a bioactive habitat, starting with a little $20 mini terrarium and having them assemble it and see what type of joy it gives them is a really good benchmark. So now we have this larger biolark. You can see it right here. Very, very nice, super thick glass. And you can see how the lid is. And then from there, you have your light. Now, when it comes to lighting, if your little terrarium doesn't come with light, there's a lot of options. We have UNS lights that work for things like this. There's a whole bunch of options for you, whether it's cheap or if you want a really high-end piece of lighting. It's just understanding, making sure you're not putting too much light into this little tiny tank. So understanding your PAR and understanding how strong your light is really important. So you guys can see this has adjustable ventilation. We're going to be keeping the vents at full. You can see the built-in LED. We're going to be keeping this LED on for about 10 hours, maybe 8 hours. And that's because this is primarily going to have a bunch of live moss in it. And what makes this tank a little bit harder is there's not a lot of space to work around in here because you're losing about over a third of your workspace. And that also can impact what actually is put in here. Now, this habitat, I am planning on having it be only a freeway. So this isn't going to be a 360-degree habitat. This is going to be like a little standard terrarium. So the first thing that we're going to do, since this is a tropical terrarium, we are going to put in our drainage layer. So the first drainage layer I'm going to use is HydroGrow version 2. And I actually put a little bit too much in there. You do not need a lot. You need just enough to cover the base. There you go. You literally want just enough that the bottom of it's covered, but not too much that it's taking up a ton of space in your habitat. This is completely optional, and some people might like this, but this is how I do all of these. I then take my HydroGrow version 1, and I dump just enough to cover it right on top. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because HydroGrow version 2 does not give you a top layer that's even. It's uneven, it's bumpy, things can get mixed up. What this does is give you the benefit of aerating and having aerating pockets. And then on the very top, you get the benefit of the even top layer from the HydroGrow version 1, as well as the minerals that are being consistently put into your soil. So as it gets settled, those air pockets will eventually go away, but it does play a big role with helping your tank acclimate, which is where a lot of people struggle when putting these things together because there's not a lot in your substrate, right? And because it's such a tiny habitat, it's a little harder to get microclimates that stay consistent because it's such a tiny amount of space. So fluctuations happen faster. Now, the next step that we're going to do is start adding in our substrate. I am going to be using my Terraflora. We're going to be then taking our leaf litter pulp mix. I'm going to be dumping that in. I'm going to be taking a little bit of sphagnum moss right here, and I'm primarily focusing on the dust, not the strands. Dumping that in there. Save the strands for later. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to take this and then this. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some substratum. You notice how I'm not doing it a layer this time. I'm thoroughly mixing it up. That is because the humidity in this habitat is going to be much higher than the other habitat that we built prior on a consistent basis. You want to make sure that this isn't dusty and that this is nice and saturated. Dump number 1, dump number 2. You do not want a deep layer of the substrate. This is all you need. I got this beautiful piece of driftwood here that is going to be part of my focal point for this build. Okay, and this is going to go in right like this. Now, I really like how this is developing. I think it's starting to get some character. Now, I'm planning on putting a good amount of moss in here, but I also am going to want some plants. But the plants also need to make sense with the build. So here we have some beautiful aspicias right here, which is a beautiful viner. I think that's going to look really nice right there. Now we need something with a little bit of height, but that isn't going to get too crazy high and grow too crazy fast. This little Photonia will be perfect right there. And then we also have some baby tears. So I already know that I'm going to want the aspicia right here. So just like I did before, I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to dig a nice little hole that goes all the way down to the drainage layer. Put this guy right here. Boom, planted. We're going to do the same thing right here for the Photonia. Put it right here like this. We're going to get it covered up and planted successfully. Done. Now there's still the question of back here, which I think this solves that problem. But the first thing that I'm going to do next is I'm going to get some more moss. We got more fern moss right here. And what's really nice is this is basically already good to go. I'm going to need to cut a small section off right here, like this, and like this. Okay. And don't worry, we'll get this little sliver here. It's really easy to use scissors with the moss, guys. Don't tear. I recommend you use scissors and you don't tear it. Now, I like the fern moss because the fern moss can be attached to wood and things like that. If you guys remember my prior video, you can use things like monofilament fishing line. You can use fishing line to easily attach those things, which you guys have seen me do in past videos. So I'm going to take this off. Boom. Now you can see we have this little bit of a section here, so I'm going to take this and cut here. All right, and this goes all the way to the back. Done. Make sure that's nice and flat. Done. Okay, now we got this little sliver right here. Done. Okay, and we still have this little corner section right here that needs it. We know it's about that big, so what I'm going to do is just take this, trim it. Now, again, tiny terrariums can be tricky because A, you don't have a lot of space to work with, and B, you can't pick plants that are gonna outgrow your habitat. I'm gonna come right here because this is where I want my baby tears. Now I just pushed it down and I went right like this. See what I did? Really, really easy. Have a nice little solid hole, big enough for the tears of the children to grow. And then we're gonna go ahead and shove this right in here. Right like that. Then we're gonna get it nice and fluffed out again. Now, getting the moss nice and saturated is very important. And then we have a little section back here that needs it. Boom. That I forgot. I'm digging it. I think that looks really nice. It's a really good start. Now, I am really hoping that this moss and the baby tears spreads, right? So what I'm gonna do, I got a nice little monkey pod there in the corner, and I'm putting it directly on top of the moss, so I'm expecting the moss to like kind of take over and grow, as well as putting this little branch right here like this. And then we got a little seed pod here, seed pod there. Next we have this beautiful bromeliad that I'm gonna actually stick right here, right like this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into the base right here where the roots are. You don't super glue the roots. Super glue around the roots. So go right like this. Get that nice little glob right there. And then we're gonna stick this, boom, right there. Now, it is going to take a second for this super glue to dry, and that's all right. Even though it is a wet surface, this stuff is designed for aquariums, so this is what it's meant to do. There we go. There we go. That's where I wanted it. Right like this. And then now that it's nestled nicely in there, I'm going to take my glue. I'm going to go around right here, and I'm just going to glue that right there, just as a little bit of extra reinforcement. Okay, I'm digging it. So now what we have is a nice little display here. It looks a little bare right now, but that's what you want. The biggest thing with tiny terrariums is when you do your build, you gotta make sure that you don't overstuff it. Because the moment you overstuff it, by the time you realize that your plants are competing with each other on too much of a scale, it's usually already too late. The other option that we can do, which is really, really easy, is we do have the ability to put a little bit of moss directly on this wood. Now, what makes this challenging is that the LED is right here, okay? So putting moss directly on this and keeping it alive and wet and healthy is going to be a challenge because it's going to dry out 10 times faster than the moss down here. Moss doesn't like bright light. None of it really does. So I'm telling you, if we put moss all along right here, you're gonna have a little problem. But where we can put it is right here, right on top. And then as it acclimates and gets established, then it'll latch onto the wood and grow up towards the light. I got one more thing I want to put in here. I got this cute little tillandsia. There it is. And boom. There we have it. Nothing too crazy, nothing too much. We got some tropical springtails right here. We're just gonna dump those in there. You could easily put isopods in here, display isopods, a whole bunch of stuff. I love the monkey pod in there. I just think it all just looks really authentic. Gonna put a lid right here. Boom. So we got 3 different tanks built. The whole point of me doing this is that way you guys can see just how creative you can be. So the only other thing that I really wanted to go over is just watch your temperature. We highly recommend do not put these in front of a window. Make sure you always have the ventilation on high. And if you are planning on putting a living animal in here, you need to have it set up for at least a month. So you can understand temperature swings, humidity swings, and just how the habitat is establishing. And then how easily, if you need to pull the animal out, you can interact with the animal. All these things are extremely important. I really hope you guys enjoyed this segment of Terrarium Tips. My name is Josh Halter. I am the owner and founder of The Bio Dude. You can come visit my store here in Webster, Texas, Monday through Friday and Saturday. Visit my website, thebiodude.com. Check us out on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. I hope you guys have a great holiday. Thank you all for your support. Dude abides.